am shifting the speakers around. So today I'd like to just give a brief introduction about my experience with restorative justice, and I would see it as the future for holistic justice. This is how I would look at restorative justice. And talking about the scenery in which we are going to talk about it, in the words of Martin Luther King, he said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." And I'm very happy to be involved with Dr. Rao, who's a missionary, and Ms. Seema Naqvi and the wonderful team at UVCT for addressing the topic restorative justice or holistic justice. And this topic does matter to all of us gathered here today. We as the criminal justice professionals, as academicians, as practitioners, and as all the other stakeholders. So a big thank you to the team for organizing this and for inviting me over. So let's begin like children do, trying to answer the 5 pertinent questions, the 5 W's and the 1 H. So what is restorative justice? Why now restorative justice? And where did this restorative justice originate? And when can restorative justice be used? And which are the points in which the restorative justice and the traditional retributive justice differ? And how does this restorative justice benefit the society, victims, the criminal justice system, and all of us around? So going into a bit of the history, Albert Eglash in 1977 first spoke about restorative justice. He introduced the term. And when he introduced the term, the context was distributive justice, which determines exactly what each participant in the trial gets, involving the therapeutic treatment for offenders as well, and procedural justice, which determines how fairly people are treated and the procedure of the justice. And of course, the retributive justice, which we all are aware of. So it's based on punishment for wrongdoing. So it is in this context that Eglash spoke about restorative justice. And like the name suggests, it restores relationships, and it's based on inputs from both the victims and the offenders. So since 77, a lot of water has flowed under the bridge, and then finally the UN has recognized restorative justice as a way to give holistic justice. So we have international instruments that promote restorative justice practices, and we have other documents, the UN documents, which recognize initiatives that draw upon traditional and indigenous forms of justice. So we have the basic principles for the use of restorative justice in the criminal justice system. We have the Declaration on the Basic Principles of Justice for Victims of Crime. We have the right to policymakers, which clearly gives the step-by-step kind of a manual for restorative justice programs, and of course the handbook on justice for victims. So coming back to why suddenly we all are thinking about restorative justice in this scenario. So on a lighter note, I remember Dr. Beulah Shekar at one of our criminology conferences saying that we in India might be lagging behind when it comes to GDP, but we are way ahead when it comes to GLP, meaning gross legislative product. So we have so many laws in our country, but still we see that there is a current disappointment at the punishment, and there is an increase in crime, there is recidivism, people repeat crimes, and there's overpopulation in prison, and our aim at punishing does not seem to get what we that and what the results we would like to see. And we have the rising concern for victim rights as well. So these are the areas in which now we are disappointed. Something restorative justice. And to develop the societal justice, we saw what happened in the Nirbhaya case, how the society went up in arms and they asked for a change in the way justice is delivered. So in this sense, we suddenly looked at restorative justice. So we're looking at the traditional model of the retributive justice, where you have the offender and the state pitted against each other. Now we're moving on to a more inclusive restorative justice model where we want to include the victim in the process, we want to include the society in the process, and we want to kind of make it more inclusive. So when we are trying to do this, what we must remember is when we bring a victim or we bring the society into the system, we must realize and must acknowledge that this criminal justice system is very, very intimidating and it's not at all victim friendly, if I may. And it is not welcoming as well. So we see the process even for us people in the criminal justice system itself working. We see how complicated it is. The entry into the system, the prosecution and the pre-trial work and the adjudication and the sentencing and the correction. So it's a very, very complicated system and not very welcoming. So we should remember that we are welcoming people into the system which is very complicated and not and intimidating as well. So we need to make it friendly and make it more welcoming. So we need to understand and make them understand the different wings of the criminal justice system, how the law is made and the enforcement, the citizens, the cops and the judiciary, how it works, and the correctional wing and aftercare as well. So we need to understand that this requires a lot of it takes time and it needs a lot of support. The victim needs a lot of support when we are looking at this restorative justice system and we're trying to bring them into the system. So when you look at when you're bringing someone into the system, you need to understand the needs of the victim coming into the system. In this context, I'd like to remind you of a film. I don't know how many of you watched it. It's a film from the 70s called Dushman, which was starring Rajesh Khanna and Mumtaz. And this, like our filmmakers way back, were more proactive and they thought of restorative justice. In this, there's a little story about a drunken truck driver who knocks down the breadwinner of the family and he loses his life. So in the bargain, the family, the widow and his children and his sister are left without any breadwinner and without any support, so to say. So it's interesting to see in this movie how the judge has ordered that this person live in the community with the victim's family and support him. So this was a fantastic model of restorative justice. So they're trying to make the victims gain from this. They're trying to restore what the victim has lost, material restoration, the emotional restoration, and an apology. So when that offender himself lives among them and provides for their daily needs, and there is a kind of involvement and there is a kind of satisfaction that the victim gets, and the offender also is accountable for what he has done. So this is a less formal process where everybody's views count and how everybody's needs are also addressed. So when you look at the system per se, you see, I'd like to take you to a case that we did in Budapest in Hungary when I was working with restorative justice and a victim offender mediation. There was a senior citizen, an elderly woman whose garden was vandalized by a young adolescent, and was brought to the justice system and he had damaged her garden, broken her fence, and so they were all sitting at the table in this restorative justice model for a mediation. And then what we asked, the questions asked were, who has broken the law? Of course, the offender has trespassed in her property and he had broken the law. So the understanding was, what is the harm? What was the harm that was done? So the senior citizen had lost her property and it was damaged. So who was responsible for repairing the harm? The young boy was asked to, and he also agreed to repair the fence and do up the garden and make right all the wrong that he had done with that. And the person who was affected by the harm, she also wanted to know, the senior citizen wanted to know, why did this boy do this? She said, I just sit at my window and look out at my beautiful garden, and that's the only way I can relax. I cannot move. So why did you do this? And then he spoke and said it was just on a whim. He just did it on a whim, and he was apologetic. He was very sorry. He said he was sorry. And the involvement, the boy also had an opportunity to express what he felt. He said, okay, I know I did something wrong, and I'm ready to restore, make good the damages. But one request, can I work on her garden after sunset, so that I am not... not everybody sees me doing this and they mock at me. So everybody's needs and were taken into account. And this is a kind of system which involves and includes everyone in the picture and gives everyone some piece of the pie, if you may. So this is what is restorative justice. And in another case, like, you see that you need to understand and assess the harms and the needs. And there is an obligation on the offender's part to set things right. And you engage all the stakeholders in the bargain. So there was another, I served as a juvenile justice board member in this town, and we had a case of a juvenile in conflict with law who had ridden a bike and caused an accident, and a little child was wounded, and he broke her leg, I think, not any. Boy was brought to the juvenile court, and what we saw is he was in standard 11. His parents were both government school teachers, and if he had been charged and been punished for rash and negligent driving, it could have cost him his future. So we decided to give him an alternative, a restorative justice model and kind of restitution. So we said that he has to visit the emergency, accident and emergency room in the government hospitals and place, and spend 2 hours there every day as a volunteer. So he realizes the impact of his action of riding a bike carelessly without a license. And the parents were also in a way to be blamed. So because they gave him a bike when he was not yet ready with a license and he was an underage juvenile. So they were also involved, and they were also asked to take care of the treatment of that little child in the hospital. And this boy had to spend his weekend in the observation home. That's where we had the juvenile justice board, and there they have boys who are schooling there, and being a government institution, the teachers are the best of teachers. So we had this boy come and volunteer in weekends and teach those young boys, standard 5, standard 6, whatever. And this is the way in which he was also happy to make amends for the wrong that he had done, and he fulfilled his obligation, and also the whole family was involved. And this is a kind of restorative justice that we envisage, that would not stigmatize the offenders, at the same time provide what the victim needs from the system. So when you look at it, it provides all the goals of the restorative justice system are restitution. You need to make amends, and you need reform the individual. So this is another case that that happened in another town called in Kanyakumari district nearby. So here there was theft of a small gold ornament in a little hamlet. So there was no one who left the hamlet or who came in. So they decided that it was among the residents of that hamlet who had stolen this ornament. And instead of going off straight away to the police to file a case, they decided, the village head and the community, all of them participated. They decided we know it's someone here who has taken it, so we'll give them a chance to return it. And to do this without labeling the person, it was decided that they put a drum of water in the center of the village, and everyone brings a lump of cow dung and drops it in. And whoever has taken the gold ornament places the ornament in the cow dung ball and drops it into the the drum of water. So in the end, they found that ornament among that among all those, that cow dung in the water in the drum. So this was a wonderful way of not labeling that person. Whoever had done it, he might have been a young boy, and if he was labeled a thief, and if he had gone into the regular retributive system, he would have been, his future would have been damaged. So this is a way in which you don't stigmatize, and of course there is repentance and apology because he returned it, and you're trying to rehabilitate, and you're trying to heal the whole community, and they have to, they also realize that they should not be careless with their things, and they cannot expect everyone to not be tempted by this. These kind of things, these are the advantage of the restorative justice system, how everybody is involved and how everybody stands to win something or the other, and they're not bitter at the end of it. So this is another incident that came to my mind when I was thinking of this, preparing for this webinar today. And also, what this restorative justice should do, it should invite full participation and consensus of everybody involved. This is another case when I was in the US Fulbright Scholar we had to deal with in restorative justice in Charlotte. This was in a school nearby where there was a basketball court, and a few boys who were not selected onto the team, they were very frustrated, so they decided to damage the whole basketball team and the pole, and the whole team, the whole field in the morning was damaged. So of course the complaint was filed, and then it was referred to the restorative justice model, and there was a mediation, and the school authorities and everyone came to the table, and these boys expressed their apology, and they said that they were frustrated, and that's why they did it. They should not have done it. And the school authorities also said that they should pay for the damages, of course monetarily, but they also promised them to give them extra coaching so that they can come in for the selection next time and maybe try to make it to the team this time. So not to they tried to divert their energy into positive things, and they tried to reunite what has been divided. They wanted to bring them back into the school community and let them feel accepted. So these are the little things that restorative justice does. It heals what is broken. It seeks full and direct accountability. So if these boys were taken to a retributive justice court, none of this would have happened. They would have just focused on the punishment, and that would have been it. So in this way, you see how what the advantages of this restorative justice model is. So then coming to the principles. So here again, you need to hold the wrongdoers accountable and to the victim and to the society as well. So principles, you see that was another case that we dealt with December 6th during the Babri Masjid time. It's always that some cases or the other come in, and there is a little bit of confusion and enthusiasm to file some cases. So we had a case that came to us. A few group of 4 or 5 boys had been playing cricket, and the charge was that they had damaged one of the idols kept there. That was a village deity, and they had damaged that. So that was the case. So we decided, the Juvenile Justice Board members decided to visit that spot and see exactly what had happened, because these were very young boys, and one of them happened to be one of Islamic faith. So that's why I think they had this charge with them. And when we went and we saw the place, we saw that this idol was covered with a lot of bushes, and it was not really cared for or preserved properly. So there was an old yellow cloth that was there, and some and a dried garlic. So it was not really intentional. And these boys, when this boy was fielding, and it happened to be him, when he took the ball from that bush, he ripped off that cloth. So then we spoke to the people in that community, and we explained to them that this is really not conspicuous, so it could have been just an accident, and these are young boys and they were playing, so maybe you should clean this place up and make the idol more conspicuous, visible, and put a new cloth around it and maybe new flowers. And so are you happy if these boys just apologize to you, and it will not happen? But it will not happen again. They'll be more careful. But this way, everybody was happy at the end of it, and of course, these boys, their future was not touched. in any way, so to say. So you see how important it is to encourage the society also to become directly involved to support these victims and to hold the wrongdoers accountable. So this is a way in which these principles of restorative justice help the victim, the offender, and the society, and also more importantly, there is no grudge or frustration. You see among the people who approach the retributive system. The offenders are not happy, the victims are not happy, and there is a lot of displeasure. So I've done a lot of work for more than a decade in prisons and among young offenders in Tamil Nadu and elsewhere. And what I've seen among those offenders are most of them have a history of victimization and they're frustrated. So victim satisfaction is so important, and this restorative justice models, they guarantee this victim satisfaction. So if there is unreconciled victimization, say a victim his needs have not been addressed, he's not treated with dignity and respect in the system, and the system does not get his views, does not give him an opportunity to say what he feels and what the impact of that crime was. So this results in anger and frustration because his needs are denied. And as a result of this anger and frustration at being wronged, they cross the threshold. So you see that many of the prisoners have had history of victimization. So they cross the threshold and they move from being a victim to a victimizer. So the victim turned offender. All the prisons you see, they're overrepresented by these victims turned offenders. So in the Nirbhaya case also, the youngest offender, the juvenile, had a history of victimization. It was reported in one of the journals, The Guardian in the UK. So this is what happens when there is no reconciliation with your victimization. So a person who is battling with his victimization, he is what I call a cognizable offender. So he is definitely going to take out that anger and frustration on somebody else or on something else. So he is a cognizable offender. And this phenomenon I would call an offense dependency. Like they have that anger and frustration until they commit an offense. It's like drug dependency or alcohol dependency. So this phenomenon is what is called offense dependency. So you need to address the victimization. And when you address the victimization, it's important to see that we are also preventing crime, because we are preventing a guy from moving on from victim to victimizer. So the biggest advantage of restorative justice, as I would see it, is crime prevention and recidivism prevention. So both of them will leave the system satisfied with the outcome, the offender and the victim. This is what is my experience with these offenders in the prison. And I see that in New Zealand also there was a pastor who worked in the prison for 21 years, and he's written 4 books, all wonderful books about restorative justice. If you get a chance, you should read it. So he's also talked about how the retributive system of justice, which is based on punishment and vengeance, is counterproductive. It fails to rehabilitate. It's expensive. It leads to people re-offending. So the same thing you see that they have also found. And so the justice delivery is now moving towards the restorative model, which aims at healing both the victim and the offender. And in New Zealand, incidentally, the juvenile system is now 100% focused on restorative philosophy and practice. So they do not have the retributive system at all for the young offenders. So when you see the retributive system and the restorative system, when you look at this comparatively, you see that the vision here in the existing system is to create a safe society by putting away the offender. In fact, the offender, lock him up and you think your problems are solved. But in the restorative justice model, you want to repair the damage that's caused by the offender to the victim and to the society. And similarly here, the crime is defined as an act against the state. You look at it as a violation of a law. It's a violation of an abstract rule. You say 302, 375, 420. So these are the ways you define crime. But in the restorative justice model, you look at it as a harm one person has caused another person, or one person has caused society. So crime is an injury which violates persons and disrupts societal harmony. So that's how you look at crime itself in this restorative justice model. And the retributive model, you focus on the past, on what happened, and you focus on the offender, and you focus on the pain that you and okay, 302, life, death. That's what you're focusing on. But in the restorative model, you're focusing on the future. You're looking at what the victim can get from this experience and what the society will learn from this experience and how to right the wrong. So that is the focus in the restorative model. Similarly, in the retributive model, the offenders are defined by the crime, murder, rape, cheat. And in the restorative model, the offenders are defined by the behavior, their capacity to take responsibility, and their obligation to set things right. So this is how you define an offender here. And similarly, in the retributive model, justice is defined by intent and process. So you're worried about the Indian Evidence Act, where your focus is on the CRPC and whether the procedure is right, whether the rules are right. So that is your focus. And here you need to define, justice is defined as the right relationships and outcomes. So if everybody is happy with the outcome, that is restorative justice. And similarly, retributive justice,
Dr. Shekar,
but in
Dr. Shekar,
you understand
just
context, the model context,
please.
context.
Dr. Shekar.
Things like that.
Excuse me, ma'am. Yeah, the time is a little up, ma'am. So you're expecting if you would wind up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay then. Well, let me just go to the last slide. So in this model, if you see the restorative model, you're trying to, it's a win-win for everybody. It's not a win-lose for the victim model, win-lose for the offender. You see that it is a win-win for everybody. So this is the advantage of this restorative justice model. You get to see that everybody is happy with the and are benefited by the system. So thank you. I think we're out of time. So your questions are welcome. Thank you.
Please introduce Somesh Goyalji. Thank you, Dr. Shekar. Thank you for interrupting. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Beulah Shekar. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you for sharing all the insights about the restorative justice and the overall background. Our next speaker is, we are very privileged to have Mr. Somesh Goyal. Let me just quickly introduce Shri Somesh Goyal is an IPS officer of 1984 batch allocated to Himachal Pradesh. Besides his varied experience in policing, he is a trained commando and worked both with the Black Cats, National Security Guard and Special Protection Group responsible for security of Prime Minister of India. He remained on deputation with Border Security Force and was given the Maharana Pratap Best Border Management Trophy in 2007. For his services against militants in the Kashmir Valley and on Indo-Bangladesh border, Shri Goyal was awarded President's Police Medal for Distinguished Services. Mr. Goyal's versatility can be understood by his mature and landscape photography that won him West Bengal State Wildlife Conservation Award. Internal security, community, policing, border management, VIP protection, ops, gender issues, protection, etc. are some of the areas on which he speaks with some authority. Shri has written 9 books, including coffee table books, one each of Spiti Valley and Border Security Force and SSB. I'm not too sure, maybe you can just clarify that. His pictorial book on Himachal Pradesh will soon be released. Shri Goyal is currently posted as Director General of Police, Himachal Pradesh. He also holds the charge of the Department of Prisons and Correctional Services. We are fortunate to have Mr. Somesh Goyal as the lead speaker in today's webinar. Welcome, sir. Please, it's your turn now.
Thank you, Seema. Thank you for the flattering introduction. And I must thank Dr. Rao, the trust, and all of you, the whole team, for giving me this opportunity to talk about restorative justice. I must admit I have been raised as a police officer in a system that is now found inadequate. I stepped into service about 36 years ago, and more than 36 years ago, I must say. And that is around the time when restorative justice was also gaining ground. It was seeking its birth or legitimacy. It was seeking legitimacy. Adversarial system of criminal justice system was prevalent all over. It is only in the last 40 years that one has seen the growth of the new model, the most favored model, also now supported by the United Nations, is the restorative justice. I must thank Dr. Shekar for giving such a lucid introduction to the subject. And I may be wanting on my experiences of restorative justice in my service in the entire career of 36 and a half years. But anyway, we'll go along. Well, what I have seen over the last 36 and a half years is that the system lays a lot of emphasis on the actions of the state when it comes to crime. The state believes that the victim's harm or victim's interest rests with the state, and state knows best how to compensate the victim by delivering justice in the prevalent system that we have today. Of course, there are a few changes here and there. Well, the victim per se, I have often asked, victim per se does not have any say in the system. Now, later, I think a section was inserted that victim could have her lawyer help the public prosecutor. But at every stage of the criminal justice system, if somebody is kept in the dark or somebody doesn't get to know about what is happening about his or her case, is the victim. So the present system that we see, the criminal justice system or the adversarial system or the retributive system that we have, this is where victim is not at the center stage, which to my mind needs to change. Victim, as the winds of change can be experienced, it's happening. Well, as Dr. Rao said, I was checking the records, and I find there are 3.5, rather 35 million cases which are pending in the courts of the country. Our criminal justice system is totally overwhelmed. If you look at the volume of work every year, if you look at the 2019 data released by NCRB, 5 million new FIRs, new criminal cases, are registered every year, and equal number of people are arrested. Mind you, we arrest 5.2 million people in a year. Look at the burden that we put on the system. And you cannot provide policemen at this rate to arrest people every now and then, every minute. You cannot do it. And similarly, you cannot have courts in every corner, every mohalla or every street of the city or a district to address the issues of satisfaction of people vis-a-vis crime. Now, so what do we do? I mean, what one has seen that the other societies in the last 40 years, people have moved away from this retributive system to different other mechanisms. Plea bargaining was one, diversion was another. Different in the US, in Europe, in Russia, whole lot of countries, New Zealand, Australia, they are practicing restorative justice, whereas we are lagging behind in a major way. Though efforts have been made, I won't say that no effort has been made. In 2003, the Committee on Reforms in the Criminal Justice System, made very, very good suggestions, which would have transformed our system from retributive to restorative. But as is our wont, the report has not been accepted in toto, as is the police commission reports. You know that we have our own system. However, in 2006, plea bargaining was introduced in the country. That was a huge leap. I would say when a new chapter 21A was introduced, and section 267 A, B, they were introduced in our CRPC, enabling plea bargaining. I have been discussing I have been going to the Judicial Academy and the National Law University in Simla, and I've been raising this issue. What holds you back from implementing or from experimenting with plea bargaining, which has been provided now at the trial stage? It can be introduced, which will take a lot of pressure off the courts. I mean, I've been talking to the public prosecutors also. Somehow, the legal fraternity, the lawyer and the bench, they seem to be some kind of having some kind of aversion to this, and this has not gone forward, which would have sorted out a number of cases, like the section itself says that cases which have maximum punishment of 7 years can go for plea bargaining. So that is somehow not happening. That has not happened. And the other recommendation of the committee was, I think it would have been a game changer, and I would still plead for that. It suggested differential penal code, that in terms of that's a social offenses code, like the offenses of civil nature, purely of the civil nature. Then the correctional offenses code, where probation and some conditional sentencing could take place. Economic offenses, those could come in, and then the Indian Penal Code could also be retained for hard crimes. Now, another issue was the capacity building for the police. I mean, when I was learning my ropes as a police officer, I found that those police officers in the field were admired, who, before registering the FIR, sat with both the parties, listened to them, tried to sort out the issue, and then would reach a samjhauta. As in my state or North India it is called, they would reach a consensus. Okay, sir, if this is done, we don't want registration of a case. All the parties went away happy. I think that is what now we want to formalize. This used to happen, but with that there were a number of problems. The system, the retributive system, it gives unbridled power to the police and scope for manipulation. So there was, unless and until we evolve systems with accountability, with roles defined, there could be some problems with implementation of the restorative justice. Another thing I find is, as I said, the victim is not at the center. I have often wondered, we have the National Legal Aid Authority. We have the state legal or the district legal aid authority. I have been asking them that you are only worried about the accused. Have you ever talked to the victim? Are you happy with the service you are getting from the public prosecutor? They say, no, this is not our charter. I said, can you increase the scope of your charter so that at least the victim will feel vindicated that, okay, here is a body of people who come and tell me, like the accused, like in the prisons. Now I'm looking after the prisons. Like in the prisons, we have some kiosks in store where we keep people informed. We have our own in-house radio system where we inform people that, okay, Mr. So-and-so, your next hearing will be on this date. Does the victim get to know about that? No. So that is where the problem comes in. But some good things have happened. As I said, plea bargaining has come in, though not much is being done, at least not in my state and in several other states that I checked. But I think slowly it should become the order of the day. Like in the JJ Act has been wonderful. There is a problem of infrastructure, but gradually, I think once the Juvenile Justice Act is fully implemented, it will address a lot of issues. The women-related issues, like in the domestic violence and the dowry and other things, mediation is necessary. That is such a wonderful thing. Small steps are being taken. It may sound utopian, as Dr. Rao said, but I see light at the end of the tunnel. I said that we are taking some baby steps towards that. And I'm glad that in the last 5 years, at least I would say, last 5 years, I have attended so many conferences on restorative justice. The academia, the non-governmental organizations, and with the participation of the government agencies are now openly talking about it. There is research going on these things. So I think we are building a good base, a springboard for India to launch into a good restorative system. Well, he said the growth. I see a lot of possibility of this into various fields. Like I find some economic offenses, I get some cases of Negotiation of Instruments Act, the local and special laws. A check bounced. The person is not able to pay. How much was to be paid? ₹1 lakh. He could not pay, sentence for 6 months. The government's cost of carrying that person in prison itself is ₹1 lakh for 6 months. So what are we doing? Who is getting, is the victim getting his money back? No. Is the person getting an opportunity? Then I made an off-the-cuff suggestion to one of the judicial officers in the High Court. I said, why don't you do one thing while pass an order that when they come to the prison, they should be mandatorily working in one of the factories, and whatever money they earn, it should go to the victim. At least he gets something. And mind you, I pay. There are certain prisoners who earn as much as 12 lakhs a year in my prisons. So there's, like in hit and run cases, the Dr. Shekar mentioned about film Dushman. There is a lot of scope. People don't realize. I see a lot of youth getting into quarrels, and I sometimes find that expression of adolescent infatuation leads to lifelong enmities. For want of a restorative discussion, there is no circle or a conference or anything that where the village elders sit down together, tell them why it is bad, how it hurts the sensibility of the girl or boy when this expression is made. Now the things can be sorted out. Property disputes, they run for generations. Why? Because both the parties are never brought on the same table. Like the sycamore tree experiment. Why can't we have under a banyan tree? Let these people sit down and discuss. And parole is a period when the offender goes to his village. That is the time when that could be utilized by the social welfare department to bring these people together and try to calm down the frayed nerves and the sensibilities. Like I say that this system, the retribution for causing a grave hurt, a case of hurt. In cases of hurt, it can be utilized. Boys 5, somebody gets injured seriously, convicted, but still the emotional, the setback that the victim has received, or he feels insulted, that insult is not addressed by it. He carries that hurt with him or her. If they are made to sit together, an apology, a gradual apology, maybe not in the first meeting, but an apology would see that, okay, if he is not punished for this, even then I'm okay. So we have to identify these. And I would say the 4 sets of penal codes that were recommended by this committee, that would do us a lot of good. A lot of small disputes. There are so many and so many local and special laws, forest cases, the excise case, and so many, like the narcotics. I'm amazed that when I look at the number of cases that are going up in my state or some other states, and the response is only of the state, as if addressing this issue of drugs and narcotics is the responsibility of only the state. We are not taking the community on board. Till we do it, I don't think things would happen. Like we interact a lot with the drug users in our prisons. We treat them, and we also talk to the parents who do not want to visit us in the jail. They say that stigma is attached there. The son or daughter will be known as a drug addict. So we convince them that here we treat them. They have no access to drugs. Let their system be cleansed when they are in the prison, and then we will release them. Then we talk to then from these people who are under trials, who come to us, or convicts, we get to know who are the other people in the village who are doing it. Then we try to work with them, get them together. Okay, tell them how it helps. So it is leading us to a lot of good vibes in the people. They feel very happy with it. And I think society also feels, the parents, the neighborhood also feels. Nobody wants to tell that my son or daughter is a drug addict. But we say, till you accept it, you will not find a solution to this problem. So I find that a number of cases that I mentioned, and there would be many more, when we sit down, the policemen all sit down and say that, okay, for these, there could be mechanisms evolved, whether at the panchayat level. We had our indigenous systems. We still have some indigenous systems. I would say that in our kind of situation, we need to be very cautious where people are caste and class ridden. We have to see the composition of these mediating bodies, these bodies, forums that would deliver this kind of justice. So we need to be very, very clear about it. We often make our prisoners sit down. I have sat down with a number of people. Like in our prisons, the largest number of people that we have is of people who are in homicide and culpable homicide. Then we have rape. I sat down with those youngsters and say, there are a number of issues. We start discussing with them, and I leave them to discuss with them and ask them, there is a sense of some sort of repentance. Now, this has to be built into the prison system. Unfortunately, we don't have. We have been able to introduce listening and empathy as a subject in our basic training. We do it. We don't have any counselors, unfortunately, in any of the prisons. But we have been able to introduce this. Listen to them. Provide some solution. and it improves the environment in the prison. Another thing that I find with the old system, or the prevalent system rather, the retributive system, is that it generates secondary victims of crime. That is the family of the accused, that is the family of the offender. What happens to them? And when I interacted with them, with the prisoners, I found that they are awfully worried about their families. Because I did a study with an IIT, and we did a study and we published it also. We found that 80% of the offenders that come into the prisons, be it the under trials or the convicts, they are the sole breadwinners. After this study, it set me ticking that enough of this yoga or music therapies. I need to give them something that enables them to support their families. So we started with the concept of Har Haath Ko Kaam. That was that every prisoner, based on their skill or after skilling, we were able to give them work. And believe you me, that after we rolled it out, our prison turnover has gone up by 35 times, and the wages that we gave to the prisoners have gone up 40 times. Now, there is every prisoner has some self-esteem. You have to give him a life of dignity. So they need to earn. The fights, the quarrels between the prisoners have gone down in my prisons because they are engaged in work. They don't have to worry about the family. Every prisoner who works in the factories, we give them the minimum wage approved by the state government, and nobody earns less than 4,000 to 5,000. We have a prisoner who earns as much as 12 lakhs in a year. That is and mind you, this boy who was in a premier engineering institute, he used to work in the kitchen. When I asked him, what is your strength? He said, sir, logic. I said, do you write software for me? We gave him a laptop. Today, he takes care of most of my software requirements. And I'm not going to share details on this forum, but he is earning 12 lakhs a year. And very soon, he may be earning 15 to 18 lakhs in a year. So this is the kind of support you need to provide them, so that when they realize, they have to realize their crimes. We sit down with them. My officers sit down with them. We allow them to engage in self-reflection. How would you like to deal with the family of those people? So I think with these experiments, things are happening. Another thing that we have been doing is that particularly in cases of rape of minor girls, before sending the offenders on parole, I made it mandatory that the no objection from the girl till she becomes major or married has to be obtained. Some people went to a high court against it. But I said, just think about the psyche of that poor girl who has been violated. She sees the same man in the same village on the street. Our point of view was upheld. And now it is a standard practice that we don't send people on parole because by punishment, the crime, the court would see the mechanics of crime, the evidence, but the violation of womanhood is not compensated. And that's where I would say that the concept of restorative justice is very, very important. The police the capacity building for police as recommended by that committee has to be done. The mediation, the skills of listening have to be built into every policeman. I see that there are winds of change, and we have to sail along with these winds. And I see that in times to come, when all these the pressure is built, or the momentum is, instead of pressure, I would say the momentum is built. The lawmakers, being the first component of the criminal justice system, as Dr. Shekar said, the legislative or the citizen, once they are aware of the requirements, I think things will change, and we will have this restorative system of justice, which is necessary in the times to come, because this current system, with the kind of pendency that we have and the number of cases we are going to add every year, will not be able to cope with it. Thank you so much.
Very nice of you. Wonderful. Thank you, girls. Come on. Next.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation with so much of information and amazing, very impressive. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today and sharing all these with us.
Thank you so much.
Yes, pleasure, sir. And now we have Arlene Manoharan. She is, let me introduce her now quickly. Arlene Manoharan is a social worker specializing in child protection and juvenile justice with 3 decades of experience since her post-graduation in social work from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. She initially worked directly with children's street situations and juvenile justice system through work at civil society organizations in Mumbai and Bangalore. Later, she worked at the Center for Child and the Law, CCL, a research center at the National Law School of India University for 19 years. Did the Juvenile Justice Program, leading a multidisciplinary team, and also led the center itself for 2 years. She was appointed to numerous committees by the state and the central government on the matters concerning child rights at a state and national level. A more recent area of interest is on restorative justice approaches. She currently works as an independent child protection specialist based in Bangalore while working part-time with Enfold Proactive Health Trust. Over to you, Arlene.
Thank you, Seema, so much. It's indeed a privilege and an honor for me to be here and to sit among very eminent speakers and people who have decades of experience of working on the issue of crime, and I think with their heart in the right place. I must say that. It's indeed a privilege to hear each of the panelists, but without hear that as police officers from working from within the system to see the potential and the scope of the restorative justice approach and to call it the light towards the end of the tunnel. I mean, I think that is giving me a lot of hope, and especially all of us who have struggled with the whole policy shift in the juvenile justice arena post Nirbhaya. I must start by saying that we were just propelled into this whole debate when we saw what was happening, the whole media pressure, and what was happening in that case. And the research that we did while at National Law School, I would, my colleague at NLS as well as currently at Enfold, Ms. Swagata Raha, a legal researcher, both of us who had done intensive research as well as approached and made submissions to the Government of India and the Parliamentary Standing Committee, urging to consider an alternate approach. Or restorative justice approach may not fit in all cases, but the evidence is so strong, and Dr. Beulah, you've so lucidly highlighted all that evidence, and we did make that submission. But I must say that now, because of this whole public sentiment, and unless we have really good evidence, we have good practice on the ground, where we are showing that difference, we at the Enfold Proactive Health Trust are on a journey, and I'd like to share some aspects of that journey and the insights the entire team has gained. I would say, like to Enfold Trust as an organization that established in 2001 with a focus on safety and well-being of children and on child sexual abuse, the healing of child sexual abuse, and therefore engaging with restorative practices from an organization who believes that the survivors and their needs need to be highlighted, need to be responded. We all as a society need to respond to that. To embed a restorative justice team within Enfold sounded perfect. So we have a small restorative practice team with Swagata Rao leading our team, and colleagues Shivangi Puri and Neet D'Souza and myself working primarily within the observation homes and on restorative justice. We also have other colleagues, Preeti, Sonalini and Malini, who are engaging in this work. Let me just, Seema, will you be sharing my slide for me, please?
Yeah, just a second.
I could share, but I'm not used to webinar with the WebEx mode, so I'm not so sure. Is it showing, Seema, or should I share?
Is it visible?
The sharing option is similar to all the apps. I mean, just to click the share button and start presenting your screen, ma'am.
Okay.
It's visible.
The
Screen is visible.
Seema, I thought you will assist me because I told you I have a problem with my laptop, so I kindly I could continue speaking just to save time because
I'm opening it. Just a second.
There's some problem at my end. Yeah.
Is it visible, or maybe I'll just share it with you. If you can just open it quickly.
Okay, I will continue from my laptop what I have saved. So just to tell you a little bit more about the work on Enfold, we believe that the principles of juvenile justice are really enabling for the work on restorative justice. The team, restorative practice team, established in 2018. And prior to that, some of us were trained by international experts like Sujata Baliga, who is now a MacArthur Fellow focusing on restorative justice, and she is still our mentor and guide. We've continued to have training and ongoing training on restorative justice. We have done intensive research on restorative justice, both in terms of comparative jurisdictions and on the Indian legal regime, particularly in the juvenile justice law, and mapping of potential sites for restorative practice, both in childcare institutions, in schools, in the community. We have developed internal protocols, given the Indian legal regime, what we can and what we cannot do within the system, and what we can do outside the system in terms of cases that have not got into the system or post the crime. That is, once they are out of the legal procedure, the juvenile judicial procedure, how RG processes can be facilitated with children who've completed their stay in, say, a special home or a place of safety. We're also doing work in restorative circles in childcare institutions like children's homes and the observation homes, where we believe that we need to create a stronger foundation for a restorative culture within the childcare institution, wherein then subsequently, wherever there is harm that takes place within that institution, restorative justice casework could be initiated in those institutions. We recently completed a very unique program called Nanu Samartha, where we have offered life skills online courses for children who've been released from observation homes post the Supreme Court judgment, and following up with them and getting them together into a space wherein we can talk about social and emotional learning, life skills, and hoping that in due course, their cases will still go on in the juvenile justice proceedings, that we will enable them to reform from within once we know whether they have actually committed a crime or not. But journeying with these children and helping us to understand and build a community of people who understand what it is means to be harmed by crime and to have committed a crime, and working together, building that community. We've also conducted training on restorative practices for a range of stakeholders, and Swagata has also taught a course on restorative justice at the National Law School. I won't go into the details of the definition of restorative justice as a different approach to crime. I think Beulah has done justice to that in so much detail. So I will just move on into just highlighting the fact that the Honorable Supreme Court has actually asserted that restorative justice is something that needs to be practiced. And I quote from one of the judgments, exploitation of children in orphanages in the state of Tamil Nadu versus Union of India, where the Honorable Court says there cannot be any meaningful rehabilitation, particularly of a child in conflict with law, who is also a child in need of care and protection. Such a brilliant statement which recognizes that all children in conflict with law are also victims of various structural other problems in which the child is fallen out of the safety, is also a victim of not having been rights being made. Very often, these children were all children of care and protection, unless the basic elements of principles of restorative justice are recognized and practiced. So this is our case law, which has asserted that restorative justice needs to be recognized and practiced. This is as recent as 2017. We also have international studies which is talking about restorative justice being a best practice. And this is the UN Global Study on Children Deprived of Their Liberty of 2019. Looking at the principles of juvenile justice, if one looks at Section 3 of the Juvenile Justice Act, as well as the definition of the term child-friendly, you will understand that the essence of restorative justice, the basic principles, are all there in the legislation. Whether you talk of the best interest principle, non-stigmatizing semantics, the right of the child to be heard and to participate in matters affecting the child, the right to safety and dignity, the principle of diversion, which I'll come to a little. This would be the focus of perhaps our conversation today. The principle of confidentiality, non-discrimination, equality, dignity and worth from a strengths-based approach, the fresh start, that every child in conflict with law deserves to be considered as a child who has to be given a fresh start. And of course, the term child-friendly, which links actually the rights of a child with the best interest, and are very important. So all these principles provide a solid foundation for engagement on juvenile justice. Now, in terms of pathways for restorative justice in the juvenile justice system in India, so in our research and in our discussions, we've also had workshops with police officers, senior police officers, officers who are actually dealing with cases of petty and serious offences at the police station. And why do I say that? Because as per the Juvenile Justice Act, in the rules, an FIR should not be registered for certain cases in terms of petty and serious offences. The child need not be arrested, but apprehended, but produced, asked to come before the Juvenile Justice Board. And there is also a possibility of disposition at the first hearing itself in petty cases. So this principle of diversion is really based, if you look at more detail into the Juvenile Justice Act, Section 315 recognizes this principle. In Rule 8.1, there is no FIR in petty or serious offences. Further, in the same proviso to this rule, there's no apprehension unless the apprehension is in the best interest of the child. And when you're looking at the first production of the child, Rule 10, Subclause 1, specifically enables the possibility of disposal at that very first hearing. So is there a possibility at that time for the Juvenile Justice Board, looking at the circumstances of the case, engaging with the child, engaging with perhaps but there are certain conditions that need to be met, which I will come to shortly. And of course, post the inquiry, where after the Juvenile Justice Board has found that the child has committed a crime, the board itself could order an order for group counseling. And there is potential for, in that rehabilitative order passed by the Juvenile Justice Board, where this child in conflict with law could be invited to participate in a restorative justice process, wherein the victim or survivor of that crime, once that child, as long as there's consent from both the victim as well as the child in conflict with law, there is informed consent, there is certain other conditions that I'm coming to shortly, unless they are fulfilled, they could be invited to sit in a circle, sit in a restorative justice harm circle, wherein this child can be facilitated and supported to acknowledge that he has committed this crime, to acknowledge the harm that has been done, to listen to what the victim sees as the impact of that harm on her or him or them, and to come to an agreement of how they could move forward in a good way. So this is a potent site for restorative justice. There is also an option for community service, which is there in Section 18.2 of the Juvenile Justice Act, 18.1 of the Juvenile Justice Act, where a child can be ordered to do community service. The problem that Enfold has with these is that really here it is now the state and the Juvenile Justice Board that is ordering this child to go through this process. That essential ingredient of voluntary participation, of a co-equalizing circle where the child, there is no power dynamic over the child and the victim are doing this totally voluntary. There is, of course, a different dynamic at play when it is ordered by the court, but definitely a possibility. Another point to be made is that restorative justice processes falls within the scope of what is called individual care plan for every child. Such a plan has to be made, and if you look at the definition of the individual care plan in the rules, it talks about this plan that needs to be made to nurture a child into a responsible citizen, to enable the emotional and psychological needs of this child to be met, to enable restoration and follow-up and social mainstreaming. So for every child, where the Juvenile Justice Board passes an order, the functionaries of the system work with this child and enable this child, the child's family, significant others, to say what is it that this child needs to do in order to be able to demonstrate that he is reforming from within and showing accountability. And this space here, a restorative justice process, could definitely be facilitated as part of that planning process. In terms of out of the system, of course, there are certain cases that don't get reported to the police at all, and here there is a scope. It is a case and not yet a crime, or also cases, as I said, in terms of they're finally disposed of the children's court, to sit with this person who's been through who's beaten the process, but the hate is still there, the anger, the disillusionment, the alienation. Is this person really rehabilitated? If one looks at the whole juvenile justice system, though it is meant to be a rehabilitative law, it is meant to reintegrate and restore. But look at children who are coming out of the system. Can we really truly say that these children are being integrated into the community with dignity, as constructive citizens, as citizens who can, as Sir just now said, earn 50 lakhs because somebody has supported them within the system? Our system has really not reached there. It is still a long way to go from there. So let me just go into the details of the conditions that need to be met for this restorative justice circle to be, or these processes to be conducted effectively. If one looks at the principle of diversion, it clearly says measures for dealing with children in conflict with law without resorting to judicial proceedings shall be promoted unless it is in the best interest of the child or the society as a whole. So the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child has also specifically enabled restorative justice in Article 43B. What is it that the conditions that need to be made to enable these things to be realized, this restorative justice to be realized? In the research and the experience of Enfold, we believe that we should not engage in net widening. We should not take up a case of a restorative justice of a child in conflict with law if by taking up the case, it's likely for this child to actually get into the system and a record being created and this child going before the court. So no net widening. There should be compelling evidence at the level of diversion whether this child has actually committed this crime. It's not adjudicated the matter yet. A child is still innocent, still guilty by criminal justice. How do we facilitate before that arrival of the decision of whether this child has committed this crime or not? There has to be compelling evidence that this child has committed that crime. The child has to freely and voluntarily admit and acknowledge that this crime has been committed without any pressure. Similarly, there has to be an agreement with the system, with the functionaries, with the court, that admission of this child in a diversion proceeding will not be used against this child in subsequent legal proceedings. So a system has to be created for that. Similarly, the victim has to come in to this process again with consenting fully and freely and able to give an informed. This is what is happening. This is not a court. A diversion proceeding is not a court proceeding. And for closure, for what are the situations of either the victim or the child, neither of them should have a disability that would compromise the quality of this restorative justice process. The child needs to be above 12 years. We believe child 12 years to participate for a child because of the power dynamic and other concerns that we have, there needs a risk assessment of what this child has as the victim to see whether by participating in a restorative justice process, are we doing more harm to them. That assessment has to be done. They both need to be clear, and the child both need to be clear that with all diversion proceedings, not going to be held this child. The child does not fulfill the agreements that are right. Child post this restorative justice process, an agreement of how we will move forward in a good way, and if the child does not fulfill that agreement, that would not again push him into the juvenile justice proceedings. So these are some conditions that we have reflected on as a team. I go to the next slide in terms of we believe that restorative justice is an internationally viable alternative to the revolving doors and way streets of the juvenile justice system. I don't know whether the animation is going to work on this slide, but I'm going to try. I don't think so. But anyway, so if one really is truly committed to achieving the rehabilitative, restorative goals of the Act, while applying these principles that I spoke about, which are there enshrined in Section 3 of the Juvenile Justice Act, prevent repeat entry into the juvenile justice system, reduce recidivism, also prevent his children from graduating further into delinquent behavior. So if you see, initially, most children who have fallen out of the safety net of families or community are on the streets. Some of them, many of them don't even come before the Child Welfare Committee, but some of them who do come before the Child Welfare Committee, the system is supposed to respond to their needs, help them to rehabilitate and reintegrate with dignity. Unfortunately, at this Child Welfare Committee, there is a door where many of these children come in and out. Not rehabilitated, not children. They then get into a sort of a vicious circle where they perhaps get into petty crime. There is and then if at all they are apprehended, they get produced before a juvenile justice board. And there again, there's another revolving door there, where many of the children in conflict with law who enter the system go in and out before the Juvenile Justice Board inside that observation home numerous times. And I can say this with a lot of authenticity, given the work that I have done with the observation home in Bangalore and what the team is currently doing both in Bangalore as well as in Gulbarga, where we know that many of the children are that not perhaps a system for rehabilitation and restoration is not strong enough. These children then graduate into perhaps some of them into serious crime, and then God forbid if they do get involved in a heinous crime, we've had a policy shift, and these children, there is a possibility of these children being produced before a children's court, which essentially could be assessed as having to be treated as an adult, and then will be treated just like any other adult in the criminal justice system because of the preliminary assessment and the decision of the children's court whether to treat this child as an adult and pass a sentence like any other adult person who's committed a crime. Unfortunately, rather fortunately, if restorative at the level of the child, a huge potential to stop these revolving doors for this one child, to stop that one-way street for many children. And I can say that two of the children that I have worked with are currently in jail. And I can say that not just me, but the system has failed those children because the juvenile justice system has not rehabilitated them. I move on by talking about, I think, Dr. Beulah, you've already mentioned the effectiveness of restorative justice, and Sherman is trying. Yes. This is my last slide. Yeah. That's my last slide, just to say that it's not just diversion in the research that we have done and that for petty or serious crime. Internationally, there is evidence to prove that restorative justice is actually more appropriate for repeat offenders and for those who commit serious crime. So I end with that, with the hope that we can continue to have these conversations and work in solidarity with kindred spirits to be able to bring that whole dream to reality, but based on evidence and solid practice on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Arlene. You really tried to sum up so many things in that time. I could see that the pace that you were going, and there is so much more that you can share. And I'm sure the other story you were sharing about the other foundation, Sachi and her team as well. I'm really sure, I hope that we can continue these conversations in future, and we will, hopefully. So we'll get more chance to talk about it further.
Yes.
Now, I think, would you like to talk, or should we just move on to an open house question answer round or something?
To you, and I did the name of and I did organization and one.
Right. Right. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I think I messed up. I mean, I'm also new to WebEx, and we are having so many technical glitches today. Rao sir, can you hear us? We are not able to hear
I'm
you.
all right.
Yes,
Seema,
sir. Yes,
now
sir.
at least 3 questions. Hello, at least 3 comments from the audience. To be fair, though we are already 15 minutes past the given time. Please,
Yes.
just request participants can three opportunities, please. Any 3?
Yes.
Any comments or anything? Announce.
Yes. So we are open now to any questions, any doubts, or any inputs, or any experience that you would like to share. We would be happy to hear from you. I would like to apologize once again to the whole, audience. I think I messed up with the slide thing. I was just struggling with it, and I can see somebody tried to help me that you are on slide 6. Thank you so much, Martha.
Anything from Sandeep Goyal, our friend DZ Tihar? Is he still there? Sandeep Goyal? No, anybody else?
Anybody else? If there is any comments or any experience that you would like to share, or anything that the other speaker might have spoken, Dr. Beulah Shekar, now that we can see you, I think it will be nice, and we can hear you. If you have any inputs, please do share something.
Thank you, Seema, and yes, I'm glad that I'm visible and I can hear all of you. So what I would like to lay emphasis on is on the training. So the Juvenile Justice Board members, the Child Welfare Committee people, they can do so much when it comes to introducing this concept. And I was fortunate because I'm from a criminology background, and my the judicial magistrate on my board also was very he was very receptive. So as a team, we could do a lot when it came to these handling of young offenders. So the basic thing would be training. We need to have a basic training on this restorative justice models. I'm glad the other speaker said, Arlene spoke about the training, and that one of them were trained um, outside the country. So it's very important that it's not enough if you just appoint these members, because they are the ones who can really make the difference. And it is very flexible. It's not like the adult offences and the criminal courts where you need to have a lot of procedure. Here it is flexible, and there is a lot of scope for introducing restorative justice models. So yes, the training, and I'm sure BPRND, I think, would help in organizing these kind of trainings for these members. And the thing is, the turnout is also every 3 years they change the members. So again, they are apprehensive about investing in training, I think. So you need to maybe give them a longer period as well. So then you're not, the investment holds good for at least, say, 5 to 6 years. Thank you.
I think.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shekar.
Hi, can I share?
Yes, please. Please introduce yourself.
Sure.
If you can please switch on your camera. Nice.
So, hi, thank you for such a nice presentation and nice discussion. I am Ritu Mehra, member Juvenile Justice Board, North East District, Delhi. Ma'am, Shekhar ma'am has rightly said we need to have lots of intervention of such kind of things, because throughout the day the children are free in the home and they share their modus of operandi. So we need to engage them, and such kind of discussions with the children, irrespective of this restorative justice. In petty and serious cases, many things can be resolved, but in heinous cases, the lot of work is to be required, because the thing is, uh, in petty, such kind of children needs regular follow-ups and regular counseling, because once they are out from the observation home, or once they are out from this juvenile system, they again repeat the same thing. So we need to strengthen this system. We get the people from one organization, from Swagata's organization, who come for the counseling to such children. But intensive counseling and regular follow-ups is required. One or two counseling will not give the fruitful results. That I have experienced during my tenure, during my post of work. So many organizations and government has to take a active lead in this, because government is not uh, seriously doing this on something on that. Thank you.
Anyone else? One more.
Thank you.
Anyone else, please? Well, if there is none, maybe it is my prerogative to close the webinar. Honestly speaking, when we thought of restorative justice webinar, I didn't know about this concept, except I tried in a different way as a matter of proactive policing approach. We may have adopted some of these techniques, but what I want to sum up is, like for example, Professor Beulah and Arlene has been doing research, and fortunately we could put academicians, field workers, and serving police officers together. Whereby we may have to, as a veteran police officer, I can say, as associated with the police reforms, many of these things we all very strongly feel these must be introduced, these are very beneficial, but nothing comes. Maybe this is the time for all of us to sit together and work from our centers. Action plan. How do we go about? How do we go about? For example, Biology has been conducting series of seminars, talking at different levels, talking. And Arlinji conducted, their group has conducted very good research. They brought out the different issues. And Someshji clearly mentioned, though there are provisions in the law, they are not being adopted. They are not being accepted. What is the action plan? Are we to continue to speaking like this, or can we do something? What is that we can do? That is what perhaps I would be very happy, all the panelists and also speakers, if you can send us your brief inputs. We'd like to put them together and maybe sit again to talk of the action plan. We know restorative justice is good. We know our number of cases are piling up. We also realize that the entire criminal justice system is breaking down. Honestly, no one has faith in any of either the police or the courts or the prisons. Everything is gone. We are just carrying on, talking about it. So my humble request to every one of you is, can there be an action plan? What is that we can do? How do we do it? Where Urvi Vikram Charitable Trust, or rather our National Center for Adolescents, as Maharaji said, for 3 years we worked in Tihar jail. Only 1 year we got funding, and the other 2 years on our own steam we worked. Results are amazing. The type of changeover in these children, the repentance they found, we noticed in them. They all wanted to go out and resolve their, interact with the other parties and sort it out. But we are trying to accommodate, we are trying to in the limited way, but in a big way, what is that we can do? Right? Thank you very much, friends, for all of you sparing your valuable time and be with us. I'm sure, we hope we will be continuing these dialogues. Somebody from Coimbatore, somebody from Bombay, someone from Shimla, and here it is from Delhi. Thank you. And thank all the participants. I would request, I'm sorry we could not give you adequate time, but you send your queries. We'll be very happy. You can send your queries to tj.uvct@gmail.com. TJ means Tihar Jail, tj.uvct. We would like to work on it. Maybe we will sit down again. Thank you very much.
Actually. So thanks for accommodating me